Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Refueling Station Live. I am your host, Dr. Erin Wheeler. I am the CEO of Gracefully Productive. We are a leadership coaching company dedicated to using research based strategies to customize productivity strategies, success strategies, leadership strategies for people of color. I'm also a nationally respected leadership coach and cognitive psychology expert with I don't look at over a decade of experience in higher education, entrepreneurship, and leadership. And thank you so much for joining me. If this is your first time, if you've watched previous videos, thank you all the same. So today we have a special episode. I have not brought on a guest just yet, but this topic and the topic we've been talking about for the last few weeks, it deemed it. And she is the perfect person to talk about this. I'm so excited that she's here today. But before I intro our guest, let's catch up on what we've been talking about the last couple of episodes. So we started our series off talking about burnout. And then in June, we begin a new series on toxic workplaces because they're both related, right? So with toxic workplaces, we've talked about how to identify it. We've talked about how to why we keep finding toxic places even after we leave one place and go to another where we thought it was greener pastures, only to find out it's another toxic environment too. And so since we've talked about, we know how to identify it, we know how to keep ourselves out of it. What's the end of this? The end is, how do we heal from toxic workplaces? There is hope. You can do it, and it is a reason why you need to, because if you don't heal from the trauma that you've been enduring in toxic workplaces, when you do find the greener pastures, you're not going to be used to it. You're going to go back to your old ways of protecting yourself and staying in fear, staying paranoid, not connecting with your peers, not trusting, not relaxing, not being at peace. And so, what is the benefit of finding a good workplace culture if you are still carrying around baggage from it? So, I would love to introduce you to our guest today. She is none other than Dr. Carey Yazeed. She's a behavioral scientist and a sought after keynote speaker who trains organizations on how to create emotionally safe workspaces. See, I told you she was perfect for this. She's the author of several books, including Shut 'Em Down, Women, Racism in Corporate America, and Everyday Struggle, How Toxic Workspaces Impact Black Women. And they are both bestsellers on Amazon. And last but not least, she has Unbreak My Heart, How Black Women Can Begin to Heal from Workplace Trauma. It only gets better as I'm reading this. In 2022, she was Core Magazine's most influential, cited as one of their most influential Blacks. And her work has been cited in Forbes, Glamour, and Social Work Today, and has been seen on CBS News. And the best thing about this, she is my Sora. She is a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority and holds a PhD in higher education leadership and research from Louisiana State University. Please welcome none other than Dr. Carey Yazeed to the Refueling Station Live. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm always impressed when people like read my bio and I'm like, oh, I really did all of that. Okay. So I don't know why. And I do a ton of these, but I'm always just like, oh, okay. Sometimes I'll say, oh, who are they talking about? Like, and then I'll be like, oh, wait, they're new. So it never gets old. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. I'm so, again, appreciative. I've told you in email, through LinkedIn messages, how appreciative I am to have you. And I've been like following your career ever since you left higher ed. I think that's I think a good. We have great experience in toxic workplaces because Gallup has cited, which was no shocker to me. It was just shocked that they came out with the research that higher education is one of the most toxic places, toxic industries, and most people don't really believe that, right? And so,
Right. They don't.
I know you will share a lot of experience today that will not only in that industry, but that will capture what we're talking about here today.
Yes, yes.
So, I have a few questions for you as we dive into our conversation of healing from toxic workplaces.
Okay.
So, we know it toxic workplaces impact everyone, but for our purpose here today, for your purpose in your expertise, and for Refueling Station, which is for people of color, why is it different for us?
Mm. Um, you know, we have a long history in this country, and our history has not been one that has been, roses, and we came over in the Mayflower and we came here willingly. We were brought here as our ancestors came as enslaved individuals. And so I always tell people that when slavery ended, it's not like they had a therapist sitting at the end of the road of the plantation when you go off into freedom to say, hey, let's debrief. Let's talk about how, like, these last 400 years have impacted you and your ancestors. And so what happened was that you had these enslaved people who were suddenly set free, who had never really sat down and dealt with the trauma that they had endured and their ancestors had endured. And what we found is that that was passed down from one generation to the next. On top of now, we have systemic racism that we deal with. So you tell people when we're in the womb, we are really experiencing some type of trauma and some type of racism, be it, health equity or what our moms are enduring when they're walking out their front door. That, a lot of people don't think about this, but that the baby is also absorb those feelings and those voices and the hostility that is taking place around them. So we have that. So before we even pop out and everybody's all excited, it's a boy, it's a girl, a neutral gender or whatever, you went through some stuff already. You get here and it doesn't stop. It just continues to intensify. And so again, you walk out your front door, you're going to be faced with something. You go on social media, and on any given day, you might see someone, a person of color, a Black person, being killed, being pulled over, or abused by the police. Most recently, we saw the mother and son incident that took place in Chicago. And when I clicked that, I was just like, okay, like a survivor of domestic violence, like, y'all need a trigger warning on some of this stuff. And so a lot of people have not processed all of that trauma that they have gone through. So you have that, but then you go into the workforce. And so you're dealing with all of the stuff that you have to deal with in society in general as being a Black person. But then we go out into the workforce, and then you're having to deal with a whole different set of issues, such as microaggressions, being bullied, being harassed. And that's compounded with what you deal with on a daily basis for, living while Black. And so I always say that that makes it different for us as Blacks because of what we deal with away from the workforce. That when we walk into that job, when we pull into the parking lot, we're dealing with a different set of issues that are just going to be piled on top of what we deal with daily in society. So it's a lot. It's a lot. And I don't think we have properly dealt with it. I think COVID, and the pandemic allowed a lot of people to take a step back and say, oh, this is how life is supposed to be. Like, I'm not supposed to be stressed out, and my job is not supposed to be as intense as it is when I'm in the office every day. And we had more people seeking out therapy at that time. But now what I'm starting to realize is now that outside is back open, people have forgotten about all of that. And it's like we're going back to normal, so to speak. And normal is, all of those compounding issues that we just have never been properly equipped to deal with to begin with.
Yes, to everything you just said. The So my background is in biology, and I didn't think that I would ever return to it, but it's returning to it in a way that I'm working on an ebook about, it's titled Black, Brown, and Burnout. And thinking like it was supposed to be so simple, right? It was supposed to be, okay, here's burnout. This is what these are the symptoms. This is how you get out. And I'm like, I can't really talk about this without talking about the past in society and why it's different for us. And you mentioned the behavioral, the psychological trauma that we've inherited. As a scientist and biologist, I've been researching of how it's in our DNA. So
Yes.
when we like, why does stress hit us so differently? It's because it's in our DNA. We are born heightened to stress. And if we have just a little bit more, that blood pressure is going to rise quickly, the cortisol level is going to rise quickly, and we hand down genetics of stress. Not we can do it through culture and messages and behaviors and teachings, but all of that we have it passed down, and we have to figure out a way to reverse that generational process.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that because, like, in 2022, 2021, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And so, when I went in and they're trying to figure out what's going on, it was just like, oh, well, you need to lose weight. And I was just like, you do realize that I'm like 130 pounds. Like, so what else do you want me to lose? Then it was like, well, you need to eat healthier. And I was like, I don't eat bad. Like, I eat healthy. And they were like, well, that's what causes diabetes. And I was just like, no, it's got to be something else. Like, if I'm not overweight, I eat properly, what else can really be going on? And it wasn't until I went to a specialist who, when she went through like my family history, she said, you are what we would call a case study, that your diabetes is genetic. So, because I had diabetes on both sides of my family, my paternal and my maternal. And so back then, old folks call it they sugar. So we had to go through that because I was just like, no, no one's a diabetic. And she said, okay, did any of your grandparents have like sugar issues? And I said, oh, yeah, they all. I heard that all the time from grandmothers, grandfathers, So she was just like, yeah. So then we talked about like their diets. And I was just like, well, they were farmers and sharecroppers. So they didn't eat bad. Like they lived off the land, basically. There was no McDonald's, Burger King, and all of that stuff. And so she was just like, yeah, it is genetic. And that's when I really began to look at how trauma impacts us health wise and how it goes from one generation to the next. In the meantime, I have a brother that's overweight that has no health issues.
None.
Like, none. And here I am, I'm the one who does all the right things. So those are things that we have to really take into consideration. Whereas my brother has never worked stressful jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I was always the one who had worked in stressful industries, like we said, higher ed, on top of being the oldest and having like those family responsibilities, being a single mom, a divorced single mama too, like all of that be like compounds, it impacts your health. And I don't think we, realize that. And so I appreciate your research, like, because I think we need more people to look at that is not just our diets and it's not just lack of exercise, that sometimes it is all of these systemic issues that are impacting us in our stress levels.
Yeah, I had one primary care doctor and she went to concierge medicine, but she was the one doctor who actually asked me, what do you do? Tell me about your day. What, all of these things. And she didn't look at me like oh, this is just another overweight African American woman who eats, all the stereotypical things. It's like, I actually do have my master's research is actually on diabetes and metabolism. Like, I know what this is. My dad has diabetes. Since I was 11, I've been going to his classes trying to make sure he's eating right. And like, can you not assume other things about me? Just like, oh, just eat more. Like, okay, I'll find another person. So
Yes.
that's why I've been on the search to find the right primary care that really gets all of these factors and talks to me, knows me, but also is cognizant of what how these factors interact with each other.
Yeah, I've just found that for me, it has helped that I go in educated.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I have found myself educating the primary care physician. And so I like to tell people just because somebody has MD behind their name or DO, because there are two types of primary care physicians you can have, does not mean that they took the elective on diabetes.
Nope.
Like I just I
Correct.
my doctor, we joke and I said, girl, diabetes must be an elective in med school because everybody doesn't understand. And she would just fall out laughing. But I'll go in and share new information with her and she'll just be like, oh my goodness, like I didn't know that. And I'll tell her where she can go and find more information. So don't just rely on what your primary care physician is telling you. You got to go in there and be informed about your own health, or you'll be 6 feet under. That
Yep.
is just the analogy. That is what I have come up with. If
Yeah.
I have to put myself first and not rely on a doctor. And one of those things was I had to realize stress is a big factor. And for me, knowing like when a job is just too much, like having my little white box under my desk and being like, okay, this enough. I'm not dying in this office, and then y'all gonna do is call a coroner and roll me out and put it on Indeed.com that you gotta open it. Like you gotta know when okay, enough is enough, and it's time for me to move on. And I just think we a lot of us are just not there, and I think we're not there because of the fear that has been
Mhm.
instilled in us over the years as well, is that you need a good job.
You got to keep that
you,
good job
you
with
got to keep
benefits.
that good job with benefits. And then you realize, like, as I recently realized, I said I'm paying for health insurance and I still have these high co-pays on top of my premiums are high. Like, why do I have health insurance again? Like,
And we don't take sick days to use them at all.
right, right. Which I was the queen of, okay, I just don't feel it today. And I would call in and be like, I'm taking a mental health day, like, and put it under sick leave. Like, you've got to be proactive. No one else is going to do it for you. And that has kind of been my hill that I said, if I'm going to die on a hill, that's been it, is that I want African Americans, Blacks, to take better care of themselves, but to be informed and to know, when you get that gut feeling that this job is just stressful, or did she really just say that to me? Like, she been making these comments frequently. You know what? It might be time for me, like, to go find another job. Let me try and start my own business. Like, but you need to remove yourself from that environment. And I think, what happened with our parents' generations is that they stay,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of that got passed down to us.
Yeah. No, that was one of the biggest adulting epiphanies. Like, Aaron, you can't have the same goal of your parents of retiring from the same job.
Right.
Like, that's like you're doing nothing wrong finding where you need to be.
Yes, exactly. I think for me, it wasn't that I had to convince myself, but I had to convince my parents when they were alive. Because my mom used to always say, like, you are not, when you get older, you're not going to have any retirement benefits because you don't stay on a job past like 2 years. The people make you mad and you start talking about your blood pressure and how they're not going to worry your nerves and you quit. And I said, but then I saw what happened to them, how
Yeah.
they retired from these jobs. They barely had enough money to like cover their living expenses. And my mom and I really didn't talk about it, but my dad and I did. And he was so hurt that I gave all these years to this employer, and it's basically like at the end I'm not getting anything back. And so he encouraged me to like be an entrepreneur. He was like, get it while you can, like don't, because this is what happens. Like you wind up with no one caring about you. Like you just cast it aside and they hire someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked about the physical impact of like stress. What are some of the social emotional side effects of working in a toxic workplace?
Oh, I tell people like you will, it starts to show up like you find yourself maybe alienating yourself from like your family and your friends because you're so stressed out. You're bringing work home. So while you're trying to work extra hours at home, you're not engaging like with your loved ones. You also start to see like how it can impact like your mood and your affect. Like you might just find yourself always down, not wanting to engage in activities, being isolated. I know when I worked in higher ed and I had a situation where I was being sexually harassed by a older student, I would cry every day on my way to work. And then when I got to work, I shook uncontrollably. So I was suffering from PTSD and didn't even realize it.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize that my mood had started to shift. So I wasn't cheerful, I wasn't outgoing anymore. I really never had like a whole lot of energy. It changed like the way that I would eat. So I found myself eating like more unhealthy foods because I was so stressed out. And I also found myself eating more. So just eating for comfort. So we don't realize that, and it happens over time and it's gradually. So sometimes you don't realize how that job is starting to impact you physically and emotionally, but also socially until it's kind of like too late. But there are some changes, and usually like your family and friends will be like, what's wrong? Are you acting funny? Like those are like some clear warning signs that maybe you need to take a step back and examine what's going on in your life. And part of your life is your job.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember all of that. I remember working and well, I've been in higher education for most of my career, but at the worst part of it, it was I didn't want to do anything except for if after work. If it involved happy hour, yes. If it involved eating, yes. If it involved going straight home and going to sleep, yes. Anything after that, I didn't really want to do anything. So I would go, wake up in the morning, get in traffic, go to work, get in traffic after work, and come home and just be a complete shell. Like I just remember my meals were being salsa and chips almost every night. Like I had no energy to cook or to do anything for myself. And yeah, and most people, I even had a good friend of mine who just left a toxic place and she just thought it was her job, right? And so once she was on a break and she was still tired, it was a layer, that the job was a layer. When she took the layer off, she went to her doctor. She's like, I'm not working anymore. I'm resting, I'm relaxing, but I am still tired. And her doctor showed her stats. Her iron, D, and B12, everything was low. Like her body was so out of whack to where
Mm-hmm.
she was in peace. It still was operating as if though she was still in this place.
Right, right. And so your body kind of gets conditioned to always, you're kind of like hyper vigilant, so to speak. And so it takes a your body to adjust, if your body adjusts at all. And so again, that's where it's a good idea to know yourself. So I'm glad that she realized like, okay, like I'm in a peaceful environment, but I'm still having the same symptoms. That's when you definitely need to check in, like with your primary care physician, because sometimes our bodies don't just automatically readjust and fall back in line to like how things should be. But yeah, that's definitely, and then it also can impact us financially. So like for me, I used to go shopping. Like that was my outlet. And I will be honest, when I left that job and no longer had to even wear these clothes, right? So I didn't have to dress up and go to work. I could do my job in sweats. And I went in my closet and was like, okay, I need to clean this out. I found so much stuff that still had the tags on them. And I was just like, I said, okay, you clearly had an issue. But I really thought about it and I said shopping was one of my coping mechanisms. For it made me feel good and it was my way to like release some of the anxiety and the stress and attention of being in that toxic work environment, was to go and buy myself a nice outfit. And I have a shoe fetish. I have over like 100 pair of shoes at any given time. But that would be my thing. A nice, buy the shoes first, and then I go find an outfit to wear with the shoes so I can wear the shoes that I just bought. That was my thing.
Speaking of coping, so there's many ways to cope. The question would be how we talked about some of the bad ways to cope, the coping
Right.
that actually bring about other problems.
Right.
So this is a two-part question. How do we cope and recover, or do you or do you combine the two? How can we cope and recover from toxic workplace experience, especially if we're still in it and we can't get out?
Okay, so I tell people this. Honestly, if you're in that toxic environment, you're gonna have to learn how to survive, basically. And part of your survival needs to be that you need to have a support system. So that means that you can't walk around in silence and not tell people what's going on with you. You got to find a core group of people, be it family members or friends, who are going to understand, who are going to be there for you and provide like that emotional support that you're going to need. I know when I was going through my ordeal, unfortunately, when I would reach out and try and tell family members what was going on, like people would just be like, oh, girl, suck it up. You got a good job. Like, you're a professor at a whole university. What are you complaining about? And I had a male relative tell me, you're just going to have to get used to that. Like, you're attractive. And I was just, what? Like, no, I'm not getting used to this. And so for me, it became having a mental health team to help me get to work every day. So I had a mental health therapist that I worked with, in addition to a psychiatrist. I am very transparent and I tell people I had a nervous breakdown because I did not leave my toxic environment soon enough. Unfortunately, in higher ed, you just can't jump up and go get another job. Transferring to another university usually can take a whole year, sometimes 2 years. It doesn't happen overnight. And so, even though I was interviewing, nothing was coming fast enough. Everything was like, well, it would be next school year. So it was like I would still have to stay there. And so I had to take medication to function every day just to get me to work, get me through teaching classes, grading papers, doing research, and to get me home. It had got to that point. But that also became part of my healing, because we would talk about what was going on, and then talking it out, like with my therapist, to say, this is not normal. Like, you are very correct, teaching me breathing techniques, teaching me how to get grounded when I found myself like becoming hypersensitive or starting to shake uncontrollably because I've been triggered and a PTSD had kicked in. Like, knowing that it was okay to have to take medication and that this wasn't going to be the rest of my life. This was temporary just to get me through what I was going through. And that lasted for a couple of years. Now I no longer see a mental health therapist. I no longer work with a psychiatrist. I'm also no longer on medication. I also no longer shake when I'm trying to type, write on a board, give a presentation. But it it was a process to get there. And so part of healing is making sure that you have the right team, the right individuals in your corner to support you.
I totally agree. It's only so many people that you can turn to who truly understand. And so I
Right.
had a core group to normalize, hey, we all feeling this over here too. It was one phone call I remember that I'm like, I'm ready to quit without a parachute. I can go live back at home with my parents if I have to. I'm ready to go and do what I really brings me joy. And she's like, girl, I just quit the other day because they was getting on my nerves. She's like, do it. And I was like, huh? Like it was just a random phone call with another Sarah. And I was like, okay.
Yes.
So you do have to find the right people who a sounding board who understand your situation. And a lot of times, especially for the professional, if you're first gen, your family may not understand that piece. If you're, they're not working in these professional environments and in management or leadership or on teams, they're not going to get it. So I will echo finding a good support system, but also the mental health support is extremely important, that you do have to have that support just to get through, so you won't absolutely lose it and get into a bad space that's going to be even harder to get out.
Or so you won't go postal.
Yes, that
You
too.
know, because I would tell people in a heartbeat, sometimes mental health is not just to help you as the individual, it's to save your coworkers, to help you from going completely off the deep end. Like, and I say that because I snapped. And when I snapped, that was the day like I had my nervous breakdown. The first person I called was my therapist. I was like, I told her receptionist, you need to put me through right now. I don't care who she's in session with, I need to talk to her. And she talked me through that situation. And she was just like, let's walk to your office, get your purse, get your belongings. Okay, are you out the building? Get in the car. And she said, because if not, we're going to have to come get you out of jail. So let me make sure I can get you away from the building. And then once she realized that I was safe and I was away from the building in my car, we scheduled like an emergency appointment for me to come in and really talk about like what had led to that event. But I always said, well, what would have happened if I didn't have her? And I was like, it would not have only been bad for me. Some co-workers could probably got hurt too for the way things was going down on that particular day. So yeah, sometimes mental health is not just to save you, it's to save your co-workers too.
I feel that too. It's needed all around, all for everything.
Yes, exactly.
So let's talk about, so that's really great advice. When I was thinking through this, I'm like, some people are in a place mentally, financially, emotionally, socially, in a place to really think about transitioning and really finding what they want. And so those are people who I love to help. Like coaching is like getting them to a place where they say, I deserve better, I can do better, and I don't have fear about, the devil I know. Most people say, well, this is the devil I know is better than one I know.
Yeah.
That's not really true. So what about those people? So I think that advice is really good for the people who are in a place who are not ready to transition. I feel like I'm on the other side of toxic and burnout, but I still have lingering, there come in a form of voices of people who I've worked with that have triggered something in me, that have caused me, especially I was so early in my professional years that it negatively shaped my professional self, shaped my leadership. And so sometimes if I'm working, I still hear that. I'll still hear that fake urgency. I'll still hear that, did you cite this? Like, where did you get the research from? Is that really your idea? Let's see it. Let's bring in somebody else, like, who has the knowledge, or, all of those, like, and I still hear it. And that's like 10 years, ago. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm on the other side, but I still feel that way. I have some colleagues, actually, one of my former team members, she's found a great place, and she's just like, I don't even know how to handle just regular work. I've always been overworked my entire career that when I have a lull, I feel so bad. I was like, that is trauma. Like, we are programmed to just type email, run here, do this meeting, do this, stay late, do
Yes.
this. And I was like, you're now in normalcy. She's like, I don't even know how to handle my boss. He's super nice. And I'm just waiting. When you get to that place, you wait on a shoe to drop. Oh, that's fake. You have all these things. That paranoia is still there. So for the people who have found a way to exit to a greener place, a positive place,
Mm-hmm.
what do they need to be aware of, and how do they recover from their past experience?
Well, one thing I would say is what you said is normal. So those are normal feelings, normal reactions. I even have them now. For me, it's just I'm aware that I'm triggered by tones. I
Mm,
am also triggered by if I do a background check on you and I see that you have a history of sexual harassment, that's a wrap. I don't care what it is you're asking me to do. It's like I'm not putting myself in that situation. So I walked away from opportunities because the individual that I would have to like work with, they had some very public um information that was out there. And I was just like, okay, why you gonna just go put yourself in this situation? And so I think again it makes you very aware, which is a good thing, of your feelings. But to know that that's okay, that sometimes that imposter syndrome is gonna creep in. And like I said, for me, like it's when I do interviews or I'm being introduced as a keynote speaker and they're introducing me, there have been times when I've literally said, "Oh wow, who are they introducing?" I forget it's me, and I'm about to go on, and just like, "Oh girl, you done did a lot of stuff." Like, it's so. I think it's this double edged sword. Like, and so sometimes I think you do feel guilty. Like I shouldn't be feeling this way. I'm in a better space. But I also think that that is just a way that your mind and your body protects you. That's a defense mechanism. It's also a layer of armor that we wear, emotional armor that we wear to protect ourselves. And so we are going to question situations. We're going to question the intentions of people. And sometimes it's just no matter what they do, you're always going to have that doubt. It's going to be there no matter what, because of the layers of trauma that you have gone through have just been so deep, and all that you have experienced. But I think the bright side of that is that you have gotten out, that you are in a better space. And so that gives you that the environment to nurture yourself and to become and to really grow as an individual and as a professional. But I think we need to normalize that some of those feelings are going to stay with us. They're not going to disappear. That doesn't mean that we're bad people, but that's just some of the scars that we're going to have, that, they have healed, but you still see the markings of where we failed, where we were bruised as a professional.
Yeah. I have to practice retraining, like capturing the thought, but taking the second and third thoughts after. Like, my first thought is probably the trigger, the old trauma, but what are the second and third thoughts that you can reconsider? What's the other side of perspective? And
Hmm.
then say, okay, well, you're not in this place. That's
Right,
not this person. And so I
right.
have to like work really hard to be cognizant, but also to turn those thoughts around, to capture them and redirect them.
And I always tell people, give yourself grace. Because I think a lot of times we are very hard on ourselves. And so we have this theory of of constantly excelling. And so my thing is, sometimes it's okay to fall as long as you get back up. And sometimes there will be failures, but that's all a part of growth. Like, in growth, you're gonna have some growing pains. And that's one of those growing pains that we have as a professional, especially when we're moving out of a toxic space into a healthy space. That there's still going to be some where we're uncomfortable, and there's still going to be some growing pains, but there are also going to be those permanent marks that no matter what you do, that they're still going to be there. Give yourself grace and just say, okay, these my battle scars, like, and they make me the person that I am today, the professional that I am today.
Yeah, yeah. And I know you train on creating safe spaces. And on the flip side of that, if you're a leader, you have to be aware of the environments that your team and your employees come from, that you don't trigger something, and that you recognize when their anxiety is heightened, when they may question or feel that way. And I've, in this position, I work closely with my team, and we are because we are a trauma informed organization for our students, we have to practice what we preach internally. And so trauma and working through is part, and stewarding that is really part of our daily practice, right? And so for me, I've learned a great deal about meeting all employees where they are, but treating them individually to say, okay, I know this person needs an open door. Hey, come in
Mm-hmm.
anytime you feel uneasy about something. I'm cognizant about any small or big change, that we have clear conversation. We have a space where people can talk about, their thoughts and their feelings. And I have to not get offended, because that's the way they need to feel safe in this place. It's not questioning my leadership skills, it's them feeling safe. And
Right.
so we have to charge out this next generation of leaders. Even if you do have a safe space, you still have to be cognizant of the things that your employees carry with them, and be
Mm-hmm.
able to make them feel safe in this space.
Right. And I also say, to add on to that, I think, with our leaders and our emerging leaders, is that you have to, and again, I go back to the theory of being comfortable, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so one question that I always tell them to ask themselves is that when you find yourself being uncomfortable with someone that you perceive as being different than you, stop and ask yourself why. But then I want you to go a step further and get to know that individual. And what you will likely find is that you all have more in common than you have that are different. And so you are going by what society has taught you that you should think about this individual, versus you taking the opportunity to get to know that individual and embracing their differences, because their differences are their superpowers. That's what makes them the person that you hire to come in and do the job that they do. But when you put limitations on them showing up as their authentic self, you're not going to get the productivity and the creativity that you need to meet your bottom line. And so again, I always say it all goes back to dollars and cents and balance sheets. But you got to realize that in order to get those, be in the green and not in the red, you got to look at your team. You got to look at your colleagues. You got to look at the people that work underneath you. And the other thing that I like to tell people too is that it doesn't just fall on leadership. That having healthy work environments is everyone's responsibility. And so sometimes it's not leadership that's nasty to your coworkers. Sometimes it's you, their equal counterpart, that you're being nasty to them, you're bullying them, because it's something about them that makes you uncomfortable. And instead of you checking that, you're lashing out and pushing against them. Well, you need to stop and do a self check with yourself. That's not a them problem, that's a you problem. And you need to deal with that.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. My one of the things that I wanted to discuss was still with people, like, so I want to recognize that healing is a long-term thing.
Yes.
It is the spectrum, right? And so I think one of the first places in healing is being able to advocate for yourself. And you showed in your examples that you did that. You got your own help, your own support, you spoke up. But what are some other ways that individuals who are still in toxic workplace begin that healing by starting with self-advocacy? What are the ways that they can communicate effectively their boundaries and their needs while they're still in this place?
One of the things I like to tell people is, you need to, if people are not going to give you boundaries, you need to set your boundaries when someone is making you feel uncomfortable. Don't, because most of the times we'll go back and ask for validation from someone else, like, girl, dude, was that? No, if it made you feel a certain way, then yes, it's something that needs to be addressed. And so you can address it with that individual one on one. You can bring in management to address what is going on with that individual so that you have a witness. I also like to tell people to document. Like, if something makes you uncomfortable, document. And so in my new book that I have out, Unbreak My Soul, How Black Women Can Begin to Heal from Workplace Trauma, in the back of the book, I actually have like a 30-day work journal. But in that work journal, there are also documentation sheets, and I call them incident reports of when something takes place. You document the day, the time, where you were in the building, who was present. So that means anyone that was around, who the who was the coworker that the incident took place with. You write down everything that you can think of in that moment. Write down what happened. And so if you need that in the future, so let's say you have to go and file an EEOC report, or you have to go and get with the civil rights attorney or an employment attorney, you now have documentation versus you having to go off of your memory. This also helps to validate your feelings and what you're going through, because now you get to see a pattern. You
Yep.
can go back and read that and say, you know what? It's only Susan that keep getting on my nerves. And this is when she get on my nerves during staff meetings. And this is what she says in the staff meeting. Like, you start to see a clearer picture, which helps you to not feel crazy, so to speak. So I think those are subtle ways that we can begin to like advocate for ourselves and take back control. So for us, it's going to be regaining our power, which we feel that we have lost through whatever it is that we've been going through.
I think that's really that's so practical. I'm really excited for your new book. But it also once because you in the back of our minds, like even the I've been researching where even the rumination of, is it a microaggression? Did she say that to me because she black, or she just saying that to me because she nasty and she got a bad life and she got
Right.
stuff going on? And so even like that rumination, like journaling and documenting, when you're looking through those trends, you can clearly it'll be apparent, and you can have evidence to where, well, you're just playing the race card. No, I'm not. I'm not.
Yeah.
Here's the evidence. So
Right.
I think that is a really great strategy, and they don't teach us this,
No,
right?
no,
They don't teach us this in Career 101.
no. We are not taught this in those classes that we take in high school or we take in college. Even in life, we are not taught this. For me, honestly, I picked up the whole concept of documentation because my background as I was a former social worker, so for 20 some years. And so part of that was documentation, documentation, documentation. Like, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So, but that would be for my clients. But then when I had to become my own client, it was just, wow, the same concept. If I don't document, it didn't happen. I need to have it in writing. And so that became my life as I started to go through like these different situations within the workforce, is I would always put it in writing. And I also like to tell people this too, that if you are asked to sign like a report, like your employer is writing you up, you don't have to sign. Like, I've had stuff shoved in my face and I was like, okay, I'm not signing that because I don't agree. If I sign this, I am agreeing with you and I don't. And I had one boss, like, she lost it. And she was like, "Oh, you're going to sign. You're going to sign this." And so I took the ink pen and I signed. I do not agree with this. And then I put the date and walked off. I never put my name on it.
That is like, that's so crazy where you like when you being put in these situations, that's when you like, that's when I learned all kinds of laws about recording. Like, it's
Look,
so crazy. I'm like, oh my God, I just came here to work. I just want to help the kids.
I
I
did
just
not
want to
come
do
here
my
to fight a
job.
whole battle. I just want to come to work, do my job, get my paycheck, and go home. That's it. And for me, go shopping. I don't care about all this other stuff. But since you're going to put me in this is how I need to protect myself and also protect my reputation as a professional. And
Yeah.
so we have to remember that that job is not going to always be there. Our generation, we're not doing 20 years in a place of employment. And so when you find yourself in these situations, you got to understand the employment laws. If you don't understand, or you feel like you're being discriminated against, know that you can go do a consultation with an employment lawyer. You can do a consultation and they'll tell you, yes, you have a case. No, you don't have a case. Some of them will even give you tips on what you need to do to start preparing to have a case. Like, and it will be the best and $300 investment you make. Some of them don't even charge you, but if they do, it's not going to be a lot. But they also help to validate that you're not crazy when they start telling you about the laws, and you're just like, "Oh, that's what that's called. Oh, okay, then, thank you." And they like, "Yeah, human resource knows that." And then they start telling you the chess moves that human resources gonna start playing with you.
Yeah,
I'm telling y'all.
that is some good information that again we were never told, and you just feel so helpless when you're in these situations that it's like I just have to sit down and take it because I need this paycheck, but at the end of the day
Right.
it's not worth it because you're losing more money, you're losing your health, you're losing your joy, your peace, your relationship with your kids, your family, you're losing all of this because of a paycheck that's not, it's not even worth it, doesn't pale in comparison. um so when so okay, we advocate for ourselves, pull them aside, we get management involved. Would you say that next step, if our concerns are not taken seriously, the next step would to be consult an employment lawyer, a law, or research what's in your rights?
Yeah, I will say this. So when I was going through my situation, there was no blueprint. I didn't know what to do. I was scrambling. And that's kind of when I said, "Oh, no one will ever go through this again. Once I figure this out, I am going to scream from the mountaintops what it is that you need to do." And so when you find yourself like in a hostile work environment, usually there are going to be some employment laws that are being violated. Your rights or in some shape, form, or fashion could possibly be violated. I say start with an employment lawyer. Employment lawyer or civil rights lawyer. But basically, if it's in the work setting, an employment lawyer. They will direct you on what your next steps need to be. If you need to go to EEOC and file a complaint, or if they can just straight out go ahead, file a lawsuit because they know that X, Y, and you have your documentation that X, Y, and Z has been done, that they have a case. So instead of you kind of scrambling, start with them, a good employment lawyer. And I say employment lawyer because we have to realize lawyers specialize. So you can't go to the criminal lawyer that's going to defend Pookie who done been, you know, caught shoplifting or whatever. That's not the lawyer you need to go to. You need to go to the lawyer that specializes in workforce and employment issues. That's their specialty. And usually over the phone, when you're telling them they're going to have you come in for a consultation, they can give you like an out of what it is you need to do to build your case, or if you even have enough. Some people go straight to EEOC and file a complaint. You have EEOC on a state level, you have EEOC on a federal level. If you work for a state agency, I do not recommend that you go to the state EEOC. Why? Because their job is to protect the state. It is not going to be to protect you. You need to go to the federal EEOC. I usually tell people just go federal anyway. And so with them, they will review your case, but they only are looking at certain types of cases. And they will tell you if you have a case and you don't have a, that means you go to an employment attorney and they're like, okay, you got they back and we good to go, right? But even if EEOC says, well, we don't think you have enough evidence, you still have a time frame that you can file a case in federal court. But it's a small window that you have, and then you have to hurry up and go find an employment lawyer that will represent you and file your case in federal court. But then at that point, you're really going to have to like get all the documentations that you need. We have to understand that EEOC they are taxed to the max and they are understaffed. So, they don't say it, but a lot of times they're telling people they don't have cases because they just don't have the manpower to go through all of this stuff.
Hmm.
So that's why I just tell people, go get an employment attorney.
And that's so crazy. Why would EEOC be so packed to the max? Why?
Right. Well, that's because more people are starting to file EEOC claims. We got discrimination that's going on. We have harassment. We have retaliation when people are whistleblowers. So you have more that's taking place. But we also have more people that are becoming aware of their rights. Yeah. And who are taking those different avenues. And like you and I said in the beginning, they're not sitting there saying, oh, this is a good job, I'm gonna stay here for 20 years. It's just like, no, y'all not gonna do this anymore. Like, let me go find I can get some help and figure out if I have some rights that you all are violating. So yes, they are getting more cases, but we're looking at the federal government, they are still understaffed.
Yeah. So in connection to that, one of my last lives was talking about how do we prevent ourselves from going to one toxic place to another? And I said, sometimes we don't do our due diligence. It's like not asking enough in the interviews. Like you said, you research and you do background checks. What are some places and additional places where people can find information of if a company has repeated offenses, or you can see what the toxicity is, like where is it coming from? What advice do you have, or places people can go to really do their due diligence and look up companies and orgs who are or not even serious violators, who don't have a traditional track record of having a good workplace?
Right. So I say Glassdoor, because they can leave a review about their employer. Okay. So if they can verify, Indeed, these are places where if you've been an employee there, you can leave a review about your experience. Look and see what the reviews say, because normally they are not lying. I'm a review person. The other thing is you can go on LinkedIn and just put in the name of the company and see who comes up and ask those individuals what was their experience like if they're no longer employed there, or what is their experience like if they are currently employed there. And, normally what you'll find is that you might have a connection that actually works there or was formerly employed there. That has been like the biggest turning point for me, is that if I, in the past, when I was looking for a new job, I would say, okay, who's worked here? I would reach out to people. Case in point, higher ed, looking to go to a different university. And I had someone in my cohort from LSU who had actually worked there. And so I said, oh yeah, that's right, he used to work there. I reached out, he's like, girl, don't
come over here.
He was like, don't go over there. And I was like, well, wait, you're no longer there? He's like, I just left like 2 weeks ago. And he just told me like what happened behind the scene, and really like the racial tension that he had experienced. And I was just like, oh, like Thank you. Like, because this is stuff that you didn't see in the news. Like, and he just
Mhm.
gave me the whole. And then he was like, well, so and so is hiring. And I really think you probably be a better fit. So and so works there. Like, I know this person. And so, he gave me some good advice, but he was just like, do not waste your time. Like, do not fill out an application. Don't go. They still crazy. Like they good and crazy. And I was like, okay, thank you. So because these people are going to give you, they're going to be raw honest. They have nothing to lose, especially if they no longer work there.
Yeah, I that can save you like the work on the front end of getting a job and being like having a resolve to say I'm going to wait and find a place for me and not just jump into it out of fear of like not having, like, I know that's a real fear. You got to have your bills paid, but it that mental anguish and the mental effort that you have to do to transition and transition out and keep transition and not having stability, that's going to be worse than you being out for another
Right.
couple of months if you
Don't
don't do
jump,
your due
yeah.
diligence.
Don't jump out of the frying pan into the fire. Like,
Into
just
a dumpster fire.
a dumpster fire at that. Just don't do it. And the other thing is, let's say you didn't do that background check, but you're having the interview. Ask the person, well, how long have you been here? And if it's been a longevity, can you tell me what are some of the reasons why you have not left? Like,
Yeah.
kind of get a feel for why or that. And I say, look at body language. Look at body language. Listen to their voice and see, like, are they telling you the truth, or are they lying because this is just their job and they need to hire somebody, but they looking for a new job too. You can get a feel for that. Look at who's on your interview committee. So if diversity is really important to you, and you sitting there and there's no diversity on that interview committee, that is a red flag that this company don't have a clue about diversity, and your life is probably going to just be miserable working there. I had a higher ed interview where at the red flag started when I got to the building. So I walk up and I'm asking where the room is because I have numbers. So I don't know. So I didn't realize I was asking one of the committee members who happened to be over in HR. And so she tells me, oh, well, we're waiting on Dr. Yazeed. And I said, yeah, I'm Dr. Yazeed. I'm looking like, why else would I be asking for the room? Like, and she said, oh, no, you're not Dr. Yazeed. Girl, wait, what? Like,
You be like, you know what? I'm not.
I had to take a pause back, like, well, wait, how you go tell me I'm not? So I was like, I said, oh, you're probably, I'm not what you expected. I'm used to this. Yes, I am Dr. Yazeed. I'm not a man and I'm not a foreigner. So can you tell me what room I'm supposed to go to? So that was red flag number one, because
Yeah.
she huffed. I guess she was mad that she was supposed to be having me in here for the interview. It was supposed to be somebody else of another nationality. I get in the room for the interview, and there's only one black woman. Everybody else is white. No one else is a
Not even a
person
person
of
of
color.
color.
That was red flag number two. And then she kept looking down. So she ain't have no eye contact. So I said, okay, she miserable. She don't like working here. And they just got her here for show. Red flag number three was they asked me a question back to the lady from HR. I did not answer the question the way she wanted the question to be answered. She started screaming and hollering at me in the interview. And,
Oh,
and no one said anything. No
so that
one
means that's how
said,
it goes.
yeah, no one said, oh, your behavior is inappropriate. Yeah, this is an interview. You might not want to do that in the interview. Like, you need to flash out in your office and after we hired a woman. And for me, that was a clear indicator of, no, I don't want to work here. Another interview it was, again, another committee. They were committee members and it was via Zoom. There were committee members that had their cameras off. why we have our cameras off during the interview? Like, you know, and then one person, it was a HBCU. Well, my red flag was it was only one black person on the committee. Oh, isn't this a HBCU? So should there be more people of color interviewing me? And one of the interviewers said, so let me get this straight. All of your research pertains to HBCUs and student retention. And I said, you are an HBCU, right? So he said, yeah, but you don't research anything else besides black people. Oh, I don't want to work for y'all.
Check, please.
Like at that point, I checked out of the interview. I don't know what they were saying. As soon as we got off, I sent an email to the person who had requested me to come in for the interview, and I was very polite. And I said, your institution of higher education does not fit with the trajectory of my professional career. This is not a good fit. Take my name out of the pool. I don't want to work there.
Yeah, we have to, and that's one of the hardest things I learned. And it wasn't even early career, it was late career, 5, 6, 7 years ago. You have to act like you have to take control over your future. Like you cannot just say, oh, okay, well, it'll work out. Nope. They show you who you are right up front.
Yes. And so that's part of you maintaining your power or regaining your power. And you know, when you went back, when we were talking about how do you protect yourself from these toxic environments, that's one way you protect yourself is not to get in a toxic environment. And look, you need to actively be aware of the red flags in the interview process. Or when you see they have a job opening, go and do your homework, do your research like you would do for anything else. Because at the end of the day, your health, your emotional well-being depends on this. And, you know, and what's the sense in going getting another toxic environment for you to last 6 months to a year and you back out here looking for another job again?
That is the word. Well, thank you so much for this. And just to recap, how to heal from a toxic workplace, get your team, make sure you have some emotional, social emotional support, whether that's a close friend who understands, a colleague who understands, or mental health professionals. Advocate for yourself, both if you're in a toxic place, advocate for yourself to make sure you don't go to a toxic place. Know the workplace laws front and back, understand employment law, understand that you have rights and you have a right to access an employment lawyer. And that is just the start of healing. Give yourself grace on that path to actually reach your healing. Did I miss anything? Any last words?
I think that covered it.
Well, I know you have a new book that I'm excited to get and will probably include in my research for my book. Tell us about what the title, how do they get it? I know you have pre-order, so let us know how we can connect and find your work.
So yes, so I have a book that's coming out, and the title is Reworking Again. So I had one title, and I was just like, no, I'm not feeling that one. So right now, today's title is Uber Rides and French Fries: What It Takes to Make an Employee Happy in the Workplace.
Ooh.
And basically, this book is because again, a lot of times we put all the pressure on leadership to make sure work environments are not toxic. And so this book is kind of like the psychological safety in the workplace for dummies. I'm breaking it down where the custodian can understand, the receptionist can understand, like entry-level workers, middle management workers, not just those that are in the C-suite. So it's going to be a book that the language is going to be easy to understand, but talking about the traumas that we go through, how to work through those traumas, what to look for, what a healthy environment should look like, and what you can do as an individual each and every day to ensure that your colleagues have a safe space to work in where they can show up as their authentic self each and every day. So my whole concept is that it's not just the C-suite's responsibility, but it's the janitor's responsibility, it's the receptionist's responsibility. If you worked in higher ed, you understand that those people are just as important in making sure that your job is goes smoothly. Like when the chalkboard is not clean, the
Yeah.
bathroom not clean, that impacts how your students are. It impacts how you perform as a professor. And so those are just things that I learned, is that sometimes those individuals are overlooked. They're not included in those decision making processes and the meetings that we have when we talk about having like safe environments, that there's some core individuals who make sure that we have what we need to function and do our jobs. And so I think giving them the tools that they need, if nothing else, will let them know that they're on the right track, and what they do matters in the function of a company. So that's what the new book is going to be about. It's about psychological safety, but what it takes to make our employees happy.
Well, I'm excited. How can they connect with you on LinkedIn and Instagram?
So on LinkedIn, well, all social media platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram is Dr. Carey Yazeed. So I'm branded. And then my website is drcareyyazeed.com. And so there you can find out about the work that I do as a behavioral scientist, a qualitative researcher. You can check out the books that I've written, and you can also look at me as a keynote speaker.
Well, thank you so much. And before we wrap this up, I'll be remiss not to remind you that I am hosting the Wisewell Leadership Summit. So if you are in a toxic workplace, you're coming out, you're going in, any of it, if you just need a respite, a rest, a time to reset, a time to relax, and a time to really do some deep personal professional work, because we're so busy during the day and weeks that we don't really take the time out for ourselves. Join me, New Orleans, August 17th through the 20th, 5-star hotel, luxury. Gotta expect that from me. I have a few spots left. I only had 15 open because it is that type of intimate, exclusive event. Have a few spots. Actually, you have 2 days to get my birthday discount. My birthday was this month. And so if you want those deep discounts, 50% off, go to gracefullyproductive.com/summit. I also have a payment plan just in case employers can't sponsor your way. There's a payment plan if you want to pay out of your pocket to make the cost a little bit easier. I definitely understand. So the Wisewell Leadership Summit, few spots available, grab them now. And if you can't make this one, go to the website. Be sure to sign up for the mailing list, because I am gearing up for the second date. I don't know the time and location, but you can be on the mailing list to find out when that will be released. And so thank you again for joining Refueling Station Live. Thank you again, Dr. Carey Yazeed, and I will see you on another episode next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.